And then it's recording.
Excelente.
Hello and welcome. My name is Carol Carter, and I'm the founder and CEO of Global Minded. We are dedicated to creating a capable, diverse talent pipeline to get more women, people of color, and all manner of diversity into the education, economic mobility, and leadership pipeline. We do that in a number of different ways, one of which is our conference every year. And this is our second year because of COVID that it's virtual. So we are going through 10 weeks of programming right now. And all of these sessions are recorded and they're all posted to the Global Minded YouTube channel. And they're also featured in the Global Minded newsletter that's read by about 15,000 people a day. So big way we reach people is through our annual conference. Another thing that we do is we have a first gen leadership program, and that'll be taking place in 3 weeks. So any of your students that you'd like to recommend for that, we would love to have them, and there's no limit since we can be virtual this year. And the other thing we do is we have monthly equity events. So they're all led by people of color, mostly diverse people are the people serving on those different panels. And those take events like this into really a monthly community of practice. And Erin has been part of that in the past. And we have a really wonderful woman who's going to be leading that up for us starting in July as well. So finally, we have Inclusive Leader Awards across 15 different sectors. And we feel very strongly that until the diversity and inclusion role models are household names, like the sports stars and the movie stars, we're not going to see the diversity we need at the highest levels. So that is another piece of what we do. So thank you so much for being part of this today. And we're delighted to hear about STEM around the world. And we have such great representation from around the world right now. Thanks to Erin Cortes, who's our fabulous STEM equity partner. So welcome everybody.
Thank you, everyone. This is super exciting. This is a great panel, and thank you again to Global Minded and to Carol for having us here. So good afternoon, buenas tardes, ¿cómo está? We're going to get to work today on how the diverse pipeline works. How do we interact? How do we work to provide access, equity, inclusion, and diversity? And not so much in the local arena only, but in a regional, national, and global environment. Today with us, it is my pleasure to introduce a number of people today. I will start with the Secretary of Education of Medellin, Colombia, Alexandra Agudelo Ruiz, la doctora Alejandra Agudelo Ruiz. Hola, ¿cómo está? I am going to go ahead and also introduce the Director of STEM Learning Ecosystems, Dr. Alyssa Lenhoff-Briggs, and also Dr. Jennifer Elise Iriti from the STEM Push Network. Then I will also introduce the other two panelists, Cüong Trän, who is Electrical Power System Engineer for NASA. How you doing? And last but not least, and exciting to have him here with us as well, is Matthew Cüong, Director of Innovation, Help.NGO. And he's visiting us right now from the Philippines. So we have someone from the Philippines, someone from Colombia, Medellin, and then the rest of us in the United States. So we're excited. Without further ado, I am gonna go ahead and get us started with the first panel question. The first panel question I'm gonna say in Spanish and English, and we have a team because I think it's very important to make sure that diversity is also reflected in the language. So, doctora Alejandra Agudelo Ruiz, ¿cómo está? Voy a empezar con usted. Le voy a hacer la primera pregunta, después la voy a poner en inglés, la voy a decir en inglés para que nuestros participantes sepan la pregunta completa y empecemos en diálogo. Muy bien. Excelente. Entonces, ¿cómo Medellín está implementando la integración del tema STEM en la ciudad y en la educación pública? How does the city of Medellin, Colombia, implement the integration of STEM in its city and its public education? Adelante.
Well, Aaron, good afternoon for everyone. It is my pleasure to be here with all of you and talk about from a topic that I am really passionate about, that I know that all of you are passionate from that. Aaron has been with us many, many times and has been working with us, so thank you so much. For this question, how Medellin has been implementing this integration of STEM here in the public institution. First of all, I would like to tell you that this STEM is approach, more than a methodology, is an approach. First of all, we sit with our team to define, or to better said, what is the meaning of STEM and what do we want to achieve with this. First of all, in our schools. And in this way, we started defining that STEM is an approach for our city that in this way can go through all the curriculum from schools. It is a way that it can be present on all the schools and curriculum from here in Medellin. And here we also have a point that is so important. It is not only science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Beyond all of this, for instance, avoiding to go snobbery, talking about STEM, we denominated being plus STEM, ser más STEM, and is the way to transcend beyond science and technology and go through all the spaces of a city like Medellin, a city that right now we're building as a learning city. It's not only like a city for learning, for teaching, but also for learning. Is constantly, this learning is constantly, and the best way to do it is with the approach being plus STEM. Here we also have social science, and it's the way that the human being can transcend all the spaces in the city. And we need to mention this, that Medellin is also a learning ecosystem for everything we have. We also have a learning, we as a learning city recognized by UNESCO. It is so important to have like studying groups for students. We also have this approach for teachers, specifically in our Teaching Innovation Center. And one of the lines is to talk about this approach, being plus STEM. Here we have teachers, for instance, for social science, even religion. They can participate in this research group through MOVA, the Teacher Innovation Center. Additionally, we also have another space specifically for a student that we call it Vivero del Software. That is like garden of software. And this name specifically is when we want the seed to grow. And right now, Medellin is a new city specifically for new economies specifically for software. So from education, we can see that learning approach. And we do it with this approach from human-centered approach. We have been working on that to close the question. The kind of implementation we made with the students specifically. We do with the students from high school, specifically for the two last years of secondary school. And here is with technical programs, but also with another like complementary studies. They do the things learning abroad with this approach.
Gracias, doctora. Excelente. Y bueno, y creo que es muy importante antes de irnos a la segunda pregunta, dar un poco de contexto cuando hablamos de esto, ¿no? So voy a hablarlo estilo en inglés un poquito acerca del contexto que está hablando. So I think for the context, and I just realized that I was speaking only Spanish and I thought I was speaking in English. So in terms of context in Medellin, Medellin has become a hub of innovation for many years. And I think that's also something that shifts the way it's approached. And for the little that, we have been able to participate, this a notion of creating this nursery hubs, right? That's what Vivero will be really. It's a nursery, right? It's like a place of growth. And that's where a lot of the students join and they develop this project. So I think it's just, I think the context of the nursery is very important here. And the Vivero del Software is just a great key to the programming. La siguiente pregunta. ¿Cuáles son las partes fundamentales o enfoque en el desarrollo de colaboraciones nacionales e internacionales para expandir recursos a estudiantes en el área de STEM? What are the fundamental components of developing national and international collaborations to expand resources to students in the area of STEM? Adelante, doctora.
Well, for us, as you mentioned before, like giving this context from our city, we are an innovative city. We are also a learning city. We have been part of also a hub of technology around the world. And we are changing this vocation of what it used to be our city. And we are doing this with technology. This kind of partnership has been around these kind of awards or recognition that we have achieved internationally. We have been participating in the international forum, specifically for STEM, that it was used to call STEM plus H, but as I mentioned to you, right now it's called Beam plus STEM. So right now we participate for different networks, where is present, for instance, Germany, one of our biggest partners, for instance, with Siemens Stiftung. We also have here in Latin America with Peru, Chile. We have partnerships with Mexico and different countries where we are building right now a network actually that we started. And we started to talk about STEM territories. And it's a willing that we want Medellin to be recognized as a STEM territory, a territory where from school, they start learning and doing things related to it. There are different also universities that are working on that, so we still working on this, on research, specifically for universities or with teachers, as I mentioned before, in this Teachers Innovation Center. So we have created this network of Beam plus STEM, and every week, each Thursday, we have 60 teachers specifically meeting virtually and all connected with the leadership of the Guardian of Software, Vivero del Software, and any other partner. And as I hope that also you, as a partner, will help us achieve what we want with them. Because those teachers are the ones that replicate afterwards our work with the schools. We call it Teachers 4.0. And those are the teachers that have our group specifically to work with technical programs in the last 2 years of the secondary education. Here we have, for instance, specialties of programming, software development, graphic design, and multimedia integration. Because for us, this technological aspect, it's key. We also have different training. We offer different training, specifically with this Vivero del Software. For instance, specifically with educational robotics and experimental robotics, with partnership with international and also national partners like NGOs or enterprises that are willing to help us in this technological hub that wants to support us. We also have training, specifically training for students actually is the Global STEM Academy with our own. We work along with him these kind of topics. With Google, we also have been recognized of one of the city that they want to replicate this STEM approach, and that this collaborative work, we have been doing these different partnerships with them, with the Technological University with Munich. We also have a partnership with them and other institutions there. And yes, it's the way that we make this network, and this is the important point. We made it possible and create different STEM territories when we can gather together, when we can talk about this passion and make different experiments as teachers do, as students do, and learn from what you do, from this special work that is STEM.
Muchas gracias, doctora. Voy a moverme un poquito a la siguiente presentación. I'm going to move ahead, but it was great. Thank you so much for letting us know a little bit more about like how Medellin is implementing STEM and how the collaborations, make everything much more feasible and innovative and impactful for its citizens. So I'm going to move forward with Dr. Alyssa Lenhoff-Briggs and Dr. Jennifer Iriti. So I'm going to start with the first question. And so the first question says, what is STEM Push and its approaches to developing networks of STEM service providers?
Thank you, Aaron. I'll give a start. So it's wonderful to be with all of you today, and I am really appreciating getting to hear the global perspective here, because we're US focused, and broadening our minds to think even beyond the US borders is really helpful. So thank you. So the STEM Push Network, it's a National Science Foundation funded alliance that was initiated in September of 2019. And the network was really born from three key realizations that our team had in some early National Science Foundation funded work. First, deep and persistent inequities exist in STEM educational experiences of Black and Brown students in the United States that result in really large disparities in STEM college enrollment, persistence, and attainment. All the different data, I could go over all the data with you, but there's too much of it, right? It's really established fact. Second, over the last 30 to 40 years, in response to some racial and ethnic disparities in STEM, many outreach programs were built specifically to engage and support middle and high school aged Black and Brown students in STEM experiences that would prepare them for college. But there's no evidence that those programs operating individually have made systemic change, right? So effective programs individually, but we're not seeing systemic impacts. And then third, admissions practices for STEM undergraduate programs in the US has had an over-reliance on standardized test scores, which have been shown to reflect the inequities in the K-12 STEM educational opportunities, therefore furthering those inequities within STEM undergrad, and in many cases introducing additional disparities and inequities in that space. So the STEM Push Network was created to really leverage that vast set of those pre-college STEM outreach programs to address the disparities in admissions to STEM undergraduate study. So we do this by bringing together these previously siloed pre-college STEM programs into the first ever network of its kind, engaging them in disciplined and iterative improvement cycles in which they test and validate ways to better serve Black and Brown students, and then use that evidence of impact of the programs to add weight in college admissions processes. So essentially, we're now working together to make a systemic change rather than focusing solely on serving individual students. So of particular interest today, I think for this audience, is the change model that we use with this set of pre-college STEM programs. So I'll spend a little time on that. The programs are currently located in 4 urban areas in the United States and range in the STEM disciplinary focus. Some are focused on math, some are focused on, botany, others are focused on engineering. But as a collective, we've agreed on a particular aim that we're trying to achieve together, and those key drivers that we must press on to realize that aim as a body, as a network. So our aim is to increase the number of Black and Brown students who enroll and persist in STEM undergraduate. And the key drivers that we are going to press on are things like recruiting more Black and Brown students, especially groups of Black and Brown students who haven't previously been intentionally recruited into these programs. Developing the valuable STEM knowledge, skills, and dispositions with these students. Cultivating students' STEM community so that they have this robust support throughout their STEM educational and careers. Connecting students and groups of students with STEM higher education spaces that are committed to anti-racist practices. So we're making a distinction and we're curating higher education institutions that are prioritizing looking at their own practices. And then finally, communicating students' competencies to admissions offices. So creating direct and coordinated communication mechanisms between these programs and admissions that previously didn't exist before. So to try to move the needles on those drivers that I just mentioned, we scan the research base and existing practices for potentially high leverage changes that programs could test out. Programs then test those changes using a specific plan, do, study, act methodology, in which they try out the change, they gather data to assess whether that change resulted in an improvement. And with multiple programs testing the same idea in different contexts, we can leverage that variation to understand what works for whom and under what circumstances. So then that learning, it accelerates the progress we can make, because working individually, it would take us many, many iterations to see the patterns and the trends that we can observe in even one cycle of network testing when we have many programs testing the same change. So for example, right now, several of the pre-college programs are testing out a change idea in which they engage their staff in a discussion routine around racism in STEM and their own positionality. And Erin's team is one of the programs that's been helping to develop this. So the intent is to press on the driver to develop valuable STEM knowledge, skills, and dispositions by building these program staff's capacity to use culturally sustaining pedagogies, right? So we're going at the capacity issue. And so then as the programs test, they're going to work together to share ideas, compare results, and then we'll consolidate that learning to determine what's worth spreading and scaling and what needs to be tweaked and tested again. So this model is known as a networked improvement community, and it can be a really powerful learning engine that helps us use our variation and our collective capacity to achieve what we couldn't working in isolation. So the STEM Push Network will be adding 3 new urban areas and 9 to 12 additional pre-college STEM programs in the fall, and we'll continue testing a range of change ideas to improve how Black and Brown students are served by programs and systems. So that's a high-level overview of our network.
Thank you so much, Jen. That's very very clear scenario. I mean, I know it's a lot of information, but I think this is where we start seeing the pieces that are starting to connect, right? I mean, how does the work that STEM Push is doing could potentially be, replicated, reviewed, or implemented in a place like Medellin, Colombia, right? Like, how does that work? So that's very exciting. I'm going to move to the next question to Dr. Alyssa Lenhoff-Briggs. What are the fundamental components of developing national, no, I'm sorry, I jumped to the wrong one. How does the work of STEM Push and TIES impacts access, equity, inclusion, and diversity?
Sure. Thank you so much, Erin. Really appreciate it. And I think that Jen did a really good job of getting us much of the way there. And so much of what's already been said today is the same. I think that we all subscribe to the same basic structural models for our work. and that, those rely on, the need for improved access for all. So I help lead something called the STEM Learning Ecosystems Community of Practice. We are actually a global network of 94 ecosystems operating worldwide. We do have a presence, we're primarily based in the US, but we do have a presence in Mexico, in Canada, in Kenya, and in Israel. And so we work very closely with the STEM Push network to scale the work there. We have 4 ecosystems, 4 of our 94 that are currently affiliated with the STEM Push network, and we will grow each year, adding a few more with the fundamental practice that we, come together as a community of practice, doing much of the work that Jen described through the NIC, and then we scale that through stories, through evidence, through all of the information that Jen shared, and through something else that I really wanted to go back to from our first speaker, who mentioned the definition of STEM. We really view STEM as not a flat set of skills, not just science, not just technology, not just engineering, not just math, but more of a mindset. And it's that mindset of iteration and of failure and trying again that we work very hard to promote and scale through the STEM Push work as well as through the STEM Learning Ecosystems Community of Practice.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Yeah, I mean, there's quite a bit going on and how things connect. And that kind of leads us, right? We're talking about how do we manage as organizations, institutions, and how do we do that work, right? But I think it's also important to make the connection to who gets impacted, right? How does that individual gets access to this and engages in that learning or in that experience? And so I think that leads me very well to the next presenter. So I am going to go ahead and talk to have us ask a few questions to Cüong Trän, who is our electrical power system engineers. He is at NASA. So the first question is, describe your educational journey towards STEM and how NASA became an opportunity.
Hi, Aaron. Hi, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here and talking with you guys. I remember that growing up, I have always had a passion for science because everything surround us are made up from science. But when I immigrated here to the US with my mom, I kind of lost that connection because of the language barrier. And we were constantly moving to different cities, and I had to attend to different high schools, work part-time to help my mom out. So I was constantly falling behind. I think the only course that I did well was mathematics because math is universal language. With the opportunity of attending to college, I believe that it was a resetting button for me. During my college years, I have met so many wonderful friends who had helped me find my connection with science again. And I decided to study to become an electrical engineer. And after becoming the very first person in my family to graduate from college, I thought that I thought that I had my life together. But the road to success is not easy. Of course, it's not easy, right? So I had a very hard time in obtaining for internships and jobs. And I had sent out so many applications to many companies across the country. And I was always got rejected. At that time, I thought that engineering was not for me, but I decided to keep attending to graduate school to obtain my master's degree because I believe that if I work hard, I will succeed. So during my first semester of graduate school, I received an email from a contracting company about an internship opportunity within the US Army. At that time, I had so many doubts about the email because out of hundreds of internships and jobs that I applied for, an internship with the US Army was definitely not one of them. But I reached out to the company and I applied for the position and I got accepted. Until this day, I still think that email was my lifesaver. I was a student who desperate for an internship. And it was like someone who was holding my hand, pulling me out of the surface of the water. During my internship, I got to learn about the career within the government, and I decided that working for the government was my career path. And I wanted, because I wanted to make contributions to this country, because it has given me so many life-changing opportunities. And I came across an internship opportunity with NASA. To be honest, growing up in a small country, I never thought that NASA was an opportunity. I never thought that was an opportunity for me. But I applied for the position and I got accepted. I think with my relevant experience and my relevant experience that I earned from college and my internship experience with the government has given me a boost in getting accepted to NASA. And during my time here at NASA, I got to learn a lot more about the agency, including with all of the fascinating science projects and incredible people that I get to work with. So I decided to stay at NASA, and I am now currently supporting two major programs at NASA, the Commercial Crew Program and the Gateway Program. For the Commercial Crew Program, we partner with private industry to develop spacecraft that carry our astronauts to and from the International Space Station, certify spacecraft, and pave the way for civilian space flights. And some of the work that we have done from the program was launching our astronauts to the International Space Station on American rockets out of American soil for the first time in 10 years since the shuttle program ended. And for the Gateway program, we partner with international partners and private industry partners to develop the next space station that will orbit around the moon. And that is my story.
Oh, that's so amazing. I think it's just like motivating and exciting, right? What will be your words of advice for someone that sees NASA as like something that could potentially occur? But how do you get there, right? And I know you kind of talked a little bit, but what would you now that went through the process, right? Of even talking about like, it was difficult, you never knew. I think, what are your words of advice?
I would say if NASA is something that you're looking into, I would say, and I wish that someone told me this when I was a student, it's not all about grades. Obtain your internships with the company that you want to work for, or at least companies that will provide you relevant experience. Because, you know, like the companies, they want to know about you. They want to know what you can bring to the table. And do not give up. Keep trying until when you get it.
Excellent. Thank you so much. That's very motivational. And I think all of our guests who will be watching the recording will be excited to kind of go in the path, right? Knowing that they could go ahead. So I'm going to move to our last presenter, giving us some time to really, after speaking with our last presenter, giving us a little bit of time for some questions, some even discussions within this group, right? Because I think right now we have all been talking about what we do, but we haven't really got a chance yet to say, how does this potentially grow? How this could lead us into, you know, very important collaborations perhaps, or just how do we see ourselves as key components of our countries, our institutions and organizations, even our professional careers. How do we work on that? So I'm gonna bring our last presenter to the microphone, and this will be Matthew Qua, the Director of Innovation. I'm gonna go with the first one is describe STEM applications in creating your own business.
Okay, so at least here in the Philippines, we are, shall we say, the frontliners in climate change. And as the previous speaker said, STEM is not just a mindset, but for me, it's also like a language, right? So for example, here in the Philippines right now, we reach almost 51 degrees Celsius in heat, which is around 123 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's really hot, right? So the question is now, and because of that heat, we now have not enough power because everybody's turning on their air conditioning. And therefore, because of that, we now have rotating blackouts, right? So those are situations wherein if you have a STEM mindset or using the STEM language, are able to understand what's going on in the world around you, right? So for example, get hit by typhoons, right? So there's a lot of physics involved, right? We get hit by about the environment. A lot of that is about biology and ecosystems, right? So having understanding the STEM mindset, the STEM language doesn't have to mean that you're a STEM graduate for you to be able to actually understand the world and figure out like what are on the business side, what are the opportunities then, right? So as an educator or from an NGO or from a business, having the STEM mindset will allow you to open up solutions, right, in how to deal with the problems that we're facing right now. So I'll give you like 3 examples. First is like right now, because of climate change, more typhoons, we want to plant in more mangroves, right? So how do you do that, right? So you use a lot of biology, you talk to public servants, you talk to NGOs, and you know, it's not about the STEM itself, but also social component, right? That's what we call the arts, the humanities, right? So there's a lot of component on that as well. So that because of that, as an NGO, you work to figure out, okay, instead of rebuilding houses again and again, as every year when a typhoon hits, let's plant mangroves, right? That's part of the STEM mindset, etc. On tech side, previously in the Philippines, we do not have, you know, NASA providing us with satellite imagery, right? We do not have really strong remote sensing. So what do we do as engineers, right? We build a balloon, put a camera underneath that, and do experiments in order to have an eye in the sky, right? And because of that, we can now use it as well for real estate. We can use it for all of these things. And we were able to spin that out of the research laboratory from a environmental science project into an actual business, right? But that will never happen unless you have a STEM mindset, because you're looking for actual solutions. Instead of saying like, oh no, we don't have satellites. Oh well, right? It's more of like, if you have a STEM mindset, you'll say, oh, okay, so here are my experiments. Here are my things that I can do. Here's the things that I can figure out. And I can break it down into smaller components to get and solve a bigger problem. So again, those are like the ways on how we do things. As Director of Innovation here in Help.NGO, we operate around the world, including in Poland, and we mostly deploy in African countries, Latin American countries. And when it comes to these places, resources is usually very scarce. Resources in terms of manpower, funding, and equipment. So having the STEM background in order to, let's say, MacGyver our way into solving problems, right? It's a good mindset, and doesn't have to be a STEM graduate in order to solve these problems, right? So we were able to teach people in Africa to build their own water pumps and be able to sell water, right? So it's the business side is a component that we add into STEM in order to make it more sustainable, right? So STEM is a problem-solving tool. Business is a sustainability tool. So that's how we tend to merge those two things.
Thank you so much. That's so interesting, because I think, you know, it doesn't matter where you're in the world. I think when you talk about resources and access and equity, you end up in the same place. You might have NASA down the street. You might not have any access to NASA, right? So I think it is also good to perceive that. So in your time as Managing Director of the Ateneo de Manila University Innovation Center, could you share with us a student success, one of the many?
That was like maybe several years ago. And that was a time wherein the university was very siloed. So I think our university, and I think a lot of universities around the world, are still very siloed, meaning that there are departments, and the departments just deal with their own, etc. So therefore, they do not collaborate. So one of the things that we do as the Director of Innovation in the university, one of my main tasks was to break down the barriers between the departments. So one of our biggest success stories was breaking down the barrier between the fine arts and the engineers. So specifically, we were now able to make a joint thesis. So for example, like usually what happens is that you will have an engineer or a computer graduate who has a very bright idea on building an app, but they're terrible in user interface. They're very terrible in design, and therefore nobody uses it, right? The designers have a really good idea. They can make it really good and make it really good in user interface, but they could not program it, so they only have mockups. So one of the things that we did was that we broke down the barriers between the two departments, fine arts and computer science, where we were able to get students to do joint thesis together, so that what they produce is not anymore a mock-up, but an actual program, right? So therefore, it can now be used by the university. So a lot of the tools that we do have internally into the university, like solid waste management, a lot of like the recycling programs, a lot of those things was able to be able to work out, right? Usually at a very cheap cost for the university and for our partner organizations, because these are thesis projects wherein we get not only fine art students to do a mock-up or computer science engineer to make a prototype, but actually make an actual product by combining the two ones.
Thank you, Matthew. That is excellent. It's very interesting to hear those barriers. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. They are just always there, right? I am going to give our panelists a little time just to think of if there is any questions that you might want to put in the chat box, or just raise your hand and ask. Before we get there, as you're thinking about this, if there is a question that you have for anyone else within the panel, or any of our attendees have a question and they're putting in the chat box, I am going to start with a bigger question, and I'm going to focus it right now in Medellin, just because I think there's quite a bit to like context, right? And understanding, right? But I think also given the circumstances, right? How does Medellin have deal with education and the pandemic? ¿Cómo ha trabajado Medellin y ustedes en la Secretaría durante el impacto que tuvo la pandemia? ¿Cómo ha trabajado la Secretaría? Porque sé que yo veo qué pasa, ¿no? Pero me gustaría que todo el mundo lo supiera. Adelante.
Well, I think the first thing is we see the pandemic as an opportunity. From the first moment that our Ministry of Education said schools are closed and education is from home, we started to think about how we can do it, how we can achieve this. And we have been working, it has been super key, fundamental, the role of the teachers. We have been working with wonderful teachers that know the STEM approach, but not all of them. Not for all it was like normal to work under this approach. And for us, actually, as a government, we build different strategies and recognize their strategies. And that is why for us it's so important this approach from the beginning. We can study, for instance, philosophy, but as other panelists mentioned, to put like always we can have a problem to find a solution. So that is why the pandemic is an opportunity, because it's a problem that gives us a different solution, and is a way that we can talk and you can understand what we are living in our city, because in your country, regardless of the country, your city, you're living also this pandemic. Maybe you're returning to the school, but right now we're giving our first steps towards this returning. But we have been living this past year this sort of problem. So this approach, this STEM approach, has been fundamental, specifically with students in nursery or for the older students, and also for teachers, because it's the way we can make visible this practice that they have done. Maybe before was invisible, but because before the pandemic, many things we cannot do. For instance, talking about evaluation around curriculum, it was impossible to evaluate in a way, for instance, or they have specific codes, but right now it is possible to have to have them together, and in the way we can group it under the umbrella of the bean, we can also work towards mathematics, science, engineer, and in that way we can build amazing projects from the schools.
Muchas gracias. Y creo que es muy importante porque esa transición, ¿no? De lo hacemos todo en persona, ya no estamos en persona y hay que innovar, aunque la tecnología se nos haga difícil o no la hemos implementado a un nivel que la estamos implementando ahora. Creo que ha abierto ciertas puertas que, como ustedes dicen, antes no se veían, ¿no? Antes no existían. So just to translate a little bit, I was just addressing that the pandemic did do some things of shifting innovation in education. Still, especially for STEM education, I mean, all education, but STEM education clearly, because it tends to be a learning by doing, right? And when you're not there, when you're not present, then we need to come up with innovative approaches to make this impactful. I think it also like pushed us to be much more inclusive and of utilizing technology the way that we never did, right? Because a lot of the technology that we're using now has been around, right? It's just, it was never implemented the way. So I think, that was the one of the approaches. I think to go again, and then maybe with the STEM push and Matthew, also like get both of you on this. As an organization, a program, how did you tackle this switch, right? This change due to the pandemic, right? Like we're past a year into it, right? But I think we're still dealing with those side effects, right? Especially working with individuals that are supporting or that are growing STEM education, STEM learning. So who wants to try to tackle this one? Matthew? Okay, go ahead.
So I think at least for us in the Philippines, it's more of us economic inequity rather than a more racial one. So I think one of the things that a school does physically is to level the playing field, right? So everybody comes to school, no matter if you're rich or you're poor, from urban or rural, you have the same facility. And what happened during the pandemic was that the economic inequities at home suddenly came into fruit, and therefore would like have issues on like how people would learn, right? So if you have your own room, just like having your own room can be a big difference in terms of making it a lot more. If you're gonna learn more or not, if it's noisy, if you're in a multi-generational home, sharing rooms, that's usually not a conducive place to learn. So right now, one of the things that we did is we went from synchronous, which is the standard of most education, into asynchronous, and then usually right now, what works is 60% asynchronous, and then 40% synchronous, just to keep up with the students. And one of the things that we did now was not anymore to do attendance, and more focus on output based, and then helping them focus on the output. One of the things that we realized before but not necessarily tackled was working with the parents. So the parents have a bigger and outsized impact now. So before, programs were not really focused on parents, just on the students. Now we're more taking a more holistic view of the learning environment and the learning system.
Yeah, and
Thank you so much. Trän, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I'll jump in. And I think, so from the STEM Push Network angle, we had just sort of launched, we had just formed as a network, and had all the pre-college STEM programs had sort of just finished up sort of deciding they wanted to participate, and we were planning for an in-person launch to bring everybody together in May of last year, when, mid-March, late March, we suddenly realized, okay, it's not going to be a 2-week shutdown. Like, this is going to be, much longer. And so we had to sort of, we adapted on 2 layers. One was how we were going to work together as a network now was fundamentally shifted, because we had planned to have 2 in-person convenings a year, where we'd have 2-3 days all together twice a year to get to know each other and work together across our different contexts. So we had to figure out how to work together virtually. So my team was figuring out, okay, how do we teach improvement science virtually? We've never done it that way. We use hands-on experiences to try to do that. And now we're virtual. So we were kind of learning that, and it preceded our programs, all of these pre-college programs, they also were in that same boat. They had to rapidly transform and figure out how on earth they were going to, continue to engage students now without being able to be in person. And, here for many of these programs, not all, for many of them, they're working with urban students located in urban areas, many who are Black and brown, because that's sort of the purpose and the target of our network, and a disproportionate number of those students are also low income. In the US, Black and brown tends to be correlated disproportionately with being low income. And so the programs were dealing with worrying about connectivity issues for their students, right? How are they going to have access to devices, to internet? And the programs really like shifted into gear to try to tackle those challenges. But also the Black and brown communities in the US were disproportionately impacted by COVID. The impacts of COVID, more illness and death, more of those families are frontline workers. And so the programs were attending to, the social and emotional impacts beyond STEM, beyond anything else, the human impact on their students. And so we as a network, we just decided to scrap what we had been planning to do. And we focused all our efforts on trying to create a space for these programs to come together and adapt and learn and figure things out together. And so it ended up being a really powerful space where something one program figured out how to do to be able to get hotspots to some of these kids so that they would have connectivity, that spread very quickly and other programs could use it. We learned from the programs about how they were doing things virtually so that we could use it as a network to try to help. And I think one of the biggest takeaways I would say that we heard come from, and there were lots of great learnings and silver linings as the program sort of adapted and innovated, but the one that really still I hope that we hold on to going forward is, there was this realization, many of them used to do hands-on science, right? You're doing hands-on, you're in the lab, you're touching things, doing things, using equipment. And now students are at home and they really got creative about how to help students draw on their own environment to see the science in their world, right? See the science in their kitchen, see the science outside on their sidewalks, in their neighborhoods. And a number of programs really built and connected into their communities and drew on the assets and the resources right there in their own families and communities. And, I think many of the programs are going to hold on to that and do more. So to your point, Matthew, it's sort of like the families, right? And the connection with the families, connection with the communities as well.
Aaron, if I can just add.
Thank you. Go ahead, Matthew.
Well, it was also hard for the teachers. For the simple fact, at least from my perspective and our perspective, we kind of suck as teachers personally, because I guess before, right, you would monopolize the class, right? You're number one. Now you take classes and they can like Google it as well. If you say something wrong, automatically you'll be punished for it very quickly. So I think it helped us to be much more honest. So when I said the asynchronous side 60%, it's not necessarily us doing the teaching anymore, right? I mean, you have people from NASA. I'm pretty sure Cüong, Trän can do way better teaching mathematics than I can. So we would usually just tap other videos from YouTube or other places that are open source and use it as part of the teaching materials. Unlike, because not everybody can be a really good teacher, right? So what we became instead was facilitators.
Thank you, Matthew. So Trän, just because I want to make sure that you also give us your perception in the workplace, right? As a first generation experiencing this space, right? How was the pandemic impacting your experience, right, in the STEM field, right, as a professional?
Well, so for me, honestly with you, so I've been performing my work. I think I would say 80% of the time I'm working at home. And I sometimes, I still come in on center because I work with hardware and I need to come in to perform a hardware inspection and working with our partners in person because of our mission, our critical mission. And also during launches, we have to come in on center to support the launch. So we are putting a risk out there to ensure that we succeed in our goals.
Thank you so much. I am going to go ahead and take us to the last question. And I'm sticking to this, this question just because I think impactful things like a pandemic or other things of this nature that are beyond our control tend to take us in a different direction and tend to show us as humans where we are, right? How are we really looking at equity, access, inclusion, right? Like issues as big as this one actually bring a lot of things to the table. So I'm gonna go ahead, I'll go in order, and I'm gonna pose this question to Medellin. Una vez más, voy para allá con usted, doctora Agudelo, pero creo que tocando el tema todavía y hablando de que cuando tenemos algo tan impactante como una pandemia, nos cambia la manera en que hacemos nuestro trabajo, ¿no? Pero también nos deja ver ciertas situaciones que a lo mejor no veníamos antes, ¿no? O que no se notaban tanto, ¿sí? O que a lo mejor existían, pero no las lidiábamos igual porque no salían tanto a la superficie, ¿no? Entonces, ¿cómo Medellín lidió con la dificultad que comentó Mati, ¿verdad? De en la casa, estudiando, aprendiendo, el acceso, la inequalidad, ¿no? Entonces, ¿cómo ustedes trabajaron en ese aspecto?
Well, look, hearing all your intervention, I agree upon the thing that we are living the same thing. And listening to you, Medellin is not far away of this reality. As Aaron mentioned, inequality is really complex in this time. It's high, and it has opened the gap socially and economically for those who can have access to, for instance, to internet or connectivity, and those who don't have. When the pandemic started, Medellin, in this public institution, has more than 50% of the students without connectivity. So for us was a huge challenge because we had around 115,000 students without connection. Students that weren't receiving the classes. So here is a challenge, how we can tackle that problem of continuity, how they can stay learning and talk about in positive terms and not only negative. So we started different strategies, for instance, donations for low-income students, to borrow equipment from schools to the students, how they can also borrow, for instance, money because they need this kind of equipment. And after a year, when we started all the process, we can say that now 20% are not connected. We also have like this huge number, but right now we are working on this here specifically in Medellin, and it's one of our biggest project. And we have this commitment with our mayor, how we can bring each student one computer that help them connect with the world, help them the family thrive. A computer that can help students and talk from the positive perspective, not only talking about what is lacking from them, but they can achieve many things and thrive in life. And this is possible with the educational transformation, because it's like the way we can mention this at the beginning, how we can make this seed grow.
Gracias, muchas gracias. Ya son las 3:59. It is already 3:59. The time has gone by way too quick. Before I pass it back to Carol, I just wanted to say thank you all for sharing. Thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your experiences, your expertise. I think even though we didn't get a lot of time to actually really talk more in detail about certain things, I think a lot of things kept them coming to the surface, right? Many things about connectivity, access, equity, working with teachers, impacting programs so that they could be better at what they're doing, about their experience of going from first gen, no access, not being sure where to go, to, achieving, right? And so I think it's very powerful, very important. And I'm just looking forward to seeing how you all connect each other as well through Global Minded, and that we are able to, get further than where we are today, right? So that as we are breaching, right, we cut the bridge, right? And so like we shrink it. So Carol, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Aaron, and so wonderful to meet all of you. And Saleh, who works with me, and she's behind one of these Global Minded, she's in Istanbul right now, but she also does a lot of work with Adrian, but she's gonna go ahead and post the information on the First Gen Leadership Program, and also any other inclusive or diverse leaders that maybe they're not first gen, but they're low income. And there's several people who have, they're from poor families and maybe their parents went to college and they're still at the poverty level. So we want to encourage people to connect to that, and we'll make sure that hopefully Saleh can put that information in there for you. It looks like she's doing it right now. And then you can just share that with your networks. And there's not a limit to who we can have, since the whole thing's virtual this year. And it's basically 5 days a week at 4 o'clock Eastern time for an hour every day. So, and there's graduates from our program, people who we met through Aaron and Adrian, who are now, out working in different jobs. There are really famous, leaders of color who are sort of, 50 years of age and better, sharing what they look for in people they hire. And there's a lot of what we just call the hidden curriculum and inside success secrets that these students really need if they're going to know how to navigate kind of the complex landscape that comes with a lot of other people's sort of zip codes that they get from privilege. So we look forward to working with all of you on that. And then, as I said earlier, we've got these STEM equity events every month. We'd love to have you all be part of that ongoing conversation to make STEM a lot more inclusive for all different kinds of people. So thank you so much. And I know Cindy Zeikers, our partner with the NSF Includes folks, and they're doing the program for the next few days. So any of you who want to join us for that, please do. And then next week, we have just amazing Health Week all week with our really diverse doctors and health professionals, and really talking about the aftermath of COVID, how to emerge COVID strong. And then it's about the students. So thanks to all of you. It's been a delight getting to know you, and looking forward to seeing everybody in person the 3rd week of June in 2022 in Denver. So just put that on your calendar right now. And thanks again, everybody, for your time. And we'll have this session. Saleh will post this tomorrow onto the YouTube video, and we'll be able to share it out with you as well. Thank you, Aaron. Great job. Thank you so much, everybody.
Gracias a todos. Hasta luego. Adiós.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.